All right, it's another Beacon 1% Better podcast where we discuss how to get 1% better every day. With your host, Chip Kispert, I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast. Chip, as always, good to see you. I see you have a guest, so why don't you introduce him and let us know what you'll be discussing on this edition of the Beacon 1% Better podcast.
RJ, thanks for the intro there. Much appreciated. Today, we're going to talk about something that's been bugging me for a while. The tech stack myth in wealth management. I talk to a lot of wealth and provider firm leaders every single week. And, here's what I keep seeing. Firms are writing bigger and bigger checks for technology, and their advisors are not necessarily feeling that they're getting benefit from the software that they're using. Obviously, that's not at every firm. Yet what I often hear is that advisors are literally juggling a dozen logins, manually having to enter in, and 10 key information into multiple systems, and that compliance workflows are really kind of held together by duct tape and good intentions. And then the data, which is sitting inside most firms and has flaws. So most tech stacks today, as we're looking out there, not necessarily assets that everyone pretends and recruits with. And in some instances, it can be a liability. I've known today's guest for years. He's one of my favorite people in the industry. He also is not scared to share his thoughts. My guest is my friend, Ryan George, CMO for Docupace, a firm that's been powering the back office engine for broker-dealers, RIAs, and hybrid firms across the country. Ryan and I have been in the trenches on consulting, our Beacon roundtables, and every time we talk, I walk away smarter. So I figured it was time to put the conversation on tape. Ryan, welcome.
Hi, Chip. Happy to be here.
Well, one of the things that I get super excited when I get you on the phone is, or on the podcast, is really being able to talk about a lot of different subjects, and you're not afraid to share your opinions. And I absolutely love that. So let's get right to it. All right. And, we've talked about this privately, but all right, let's have a public go at it.
You're doxing my ideas, Chip. You're doxing.
You with Docupace really sit at the intersection of operations, compliance, and advisor experience. Add to that investor experience every day. What are, three trends that you're seeing now that are really forcing enterprise wealth firms, broker-dealers, RIAs, bank programs, regionals to fundamentally rethink how they operate? And to be honest, which of these are most firms still ignoring?
Sure. So I'll start with the obvious, and the obvious would be AI, and sort of where does AI take the business? I think we were in a phase, say 2 years ago, where AI was exciting. Everybody was super excited. Then last year, I think we had a bit of at the start of the year, had sort of AI freak out. Like, where do I find my value? I'm worried about these tools. I think we had a bit of a mania, sort of like the tulip crisis of the AI world. So I think what we have right now is sort of things are leveling out where AI is becoming much more prevalent in existing tools versus standalone tools. And so I think we're taking that next phase of adoption. And what you're still ready to see is sort of how do existing companies like Docupace, who we have 400,000 users, all these like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of workflows, how can we put AI into those in order to make it successful? So I think you'll see both things. One, I think you'll continue to see what I would say like point solution adoption on AI. That's there. Two, I think you're going to see incumbent. So what they would like to label us as legacy tech, and not a nice way. That's not a nice thing to say. What they're trying to label us is that I think we will be catching up in terms of having that capability. The last part, I think, where they're dragging their heels for this particular topic is, I think firms are still slow to adopt. I think they're afraid of what happens with their client data. I think they're afraid of breaches. I think they're afraid of having people learn on their client data. And so I think we still have a ways to go in sort of getting people comfortable there. I could go to number two, but I'll let you reflect to my first one.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hear a lot about tech debt right now, and we see a lot of movement on different technologies. And ultimately we're hearing from advisors that they're a little overwhelmed by all the tech they have to manage and put together. So, when we look at it, it's how do you make that more simple and streamlined so the advisors can get back to their businesses?
I think we're awash in tech. I think we're awash in things that do one thing for us. Even as a marketer, I look at my team when I was doing budgets. I said, do we really need 20 tools that we're paying $19 a month for? Like, probably not. And so I think you're definitely seeing that. I don't know when it levels out. I wish I could tell the advisor community it's going to get better. Yeah, it'll get better. I just don't know when. But I do think there's, from a tech debt standpoint, they're buying technology on a credit card. And when is that bill going to come due? And I think that is important. I think another piece that's really important of it is, I think it's never been more incumbent of how an advisor spends their time. And this is going to be a huge challenge, I think, for firms, not because they can use technology to free up their time, but what do they do with that time? Is really going to be, I think, separates the growth leaders from the people who are just kind of staying in the lifestyle stage.
Interesting. All right. I'm anxious for number 2.
All right. So number 2, I would say, is going to be, what do we do in the world of compliance? So I think compliance is one of those things where it's all of your risk lies within your compliance processes. And all these tools are gathering all sorts of information that's going to be archived and stored. What's in that, right? I think we've learned from, I won't name names, but I think we've learned from some things in the public media right now that the storage of files over decades can lead to all sorts of things being exposed. And I think that's really interesting to see how not only does the providers do it, but what sort of cottage industry pops up that says, hey, we can clean your data scrub your things from like we can redact pieces from your storage so you can reduce your risk. I think that's something that we haven't seen a lot yet, but it's going to be, it used to be like storage capacity was huge. Now it's going to be the storage of what's in there is going to be huge.
Well, and I think we have a question a little bit down the road where we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. All right. And number 3.
The third one, I think, is a bit of a stretch in terms of seeing my view of it, is sort of when does the actual transfer of wealth, where does the actual shift in dynamics of the industry actually happen? I'm 43. I will say my age of 43. Since I've been in the industry, we've talked about advisors aging. We've talked about clients aging. We've talked about this quote unquote great wealth transfer that never really materialized in the great way. And I think, to my honest opinions, it's already half over. Those assets are already flowing to the next thing. Even people that are in who's remaining of the greatest gen are in the baby boomers. They're being proactive before they pass away to put those assets to play, either with family members or charities or legacy planning, what have you. And I think as the industry, we have to stop talking about the big wave and start looking for those opportunities to treat it almost like on a case-by-case basis.
That's fascinating. It's interesting how you kind of laid that out. What I'm looking at is thinking about how the advisor world changes in the next 3 to 5 years, right? So I love to play this game. Fast forward to 2029, 2031, an advisor opens their laptop, probably from their kitchen table or coffee shop, because let's be real, that's where the work happens now. How does their technology experience look different from today?
Well, I think they may not be opening the laptop. I think where an advisor adds value, or an advisor, I think, should own the space, is in the conversation we're having today. Yes, we are doing it virtually, so I'm somewhat not buying my own rule, but I do think that getting in front of and talking and actually experiencing clients will be much more critical, because a lot of the stuff that they're doing today, the admin work, that's what the 60% of work they do, that's admin work. A lot of it will be done overnight in the background, done by agents, done by automation, done by things that they don't need to do. And so again, they're going to have to retrain themselves on where they spend their time and where they spend their focus. I think the human value of the advisor is infinite, but they have to find ways to insert that into the process as much as possible.
I would suggest that process is going to change, which you alluded to earlier. And here's a question, because you see so many different firms out there, Ryan. As we're moving towards that, right? And the planning's going on, where do you see firms falling short in that kind of progression?
Yeah, I mean, I think like esoteric or external services. So think of it this way. Right now, we're in this great democratization of the family office, right? You used to have hundreds of millions of assets in order to get this white glove service and have this team of people who handle everything for you. Now, I think that's actually going down market, and you're going to have $10 million and have some level of white glove service. And I think that the ones who are really leading the space are thinking outside of just the delivery of planning and the delivery of advice. And they're thinking about how can I stick my fingers into their entire life and really become what we call that trusted advisor that you always hear people talk about it. A trusted advisor has to talk about career advice and, marriage counseling or your marriage advice, or even parental. There's all these things that people need trusted advisor for. And if you stay just in the money side, I think you probably aren't adding as much value as you can.
Right. So you alluded to this a little bit before, but, and this actually comes from a question. We have an upcoming compliance roundtable, and it comes from a community question that we just got in today.
Hot off the press.
How do you see AI really augmenting, not replacing the operations and compliance layer? And, what do you see firms expecting out of AI? Are they expecting, resource control? What do you think they're expecting?
I think there's a wide spectrum of what people are expecting. I think the people some of this stuff is stuff we've seen before. The people who are really into technology and really early adopters of technology are going to find ways to make it do all sorts of things. Like I heard somebody say, well, I taught Chad how to order a pizza. And I said, why would you do that? Why would you spend the time? That's a pretty simple task. So I think it's not all just about look at all the cool stuff it can do. I think the next phase is look at the value it's adding to me. For instance, like if I'm an advisor, on the work today, I get a readout of the things I need to do today. And it's automatic on my phone, or I can read through it on my Bluetooth. Or other things of like, you can be listening to a podcast and it pause and say, hey, that's a good point. You should write that. I'm going to put that in your notes so that you can think about that to your next. Cause I know a lot of podcast listening is like business development, other things like personal development. And so I think there's just all sorts of things that come with data, that can be really useful. We've got archives. We all have archives of our behaviors, right? And so think about working with a chatbot or having an agent, sort of help you as you're like, not only your assistant, but as your guide and coach, right? Like, hey, Chip, you really missed an opportunity to talk about legacy planning with that client that you just spoke with. Here's how we can recognize that next time. Like that sort of thing, I think is happening and will be a huge part of what we do have moving forward.
So Ryan, it's fascinating because I think I've had this conversation about the coaching aspect of AI probably half a dozen times in the last 2 weeks, and different firms really saying, hey, can we do that? Can we plug that in to help make advisors better or optimize, their time and resources?
It's very easy. Think about, I guarantee you there's a junior partner or want to be junior partner in an advisory firm as we speak, who's writing to some bot about how do I become an equity partner? What do I need to do in order to deserve it? And it's happening. So I think this is something that's just going to happen on a much more larger scale.
Great point. You talked, so when I look at data at Docupace, I look as a data company. You guys are managing data, right? You talked earlier about those old files, those old archived, PDFs, emails, scanned documents, handwritten notes that go back 10, 15 years, 20 years. But never mind today's note takers, which are creating incredible amount of unstructured data. How do we get our arms around this? Because it's interesting. Those firms that do data better, right, are more valuable. And we've seen where M&A deals have gotten torpedoed by that exact issue. But what does data health actually look like in practice? And, why is this ticking time bomb that seemingly nobody's really diffusing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have developed a proof of concept. It's not live. It's not in product. I don't even know exactly what the next phase is for it, but we were curious of that same thing. So we developed an overlay into our storage component to see what it could return in terms of searching for specific things. And it was actually really, really impressive of what it could return. So I think think of what at least generative AI can do. takes a large amount of unstructured data and be able to make sense of it and pull out key pieces of information. I think that's a tremendously valuable thing. But then what do you do with it? I think what do you do with it would be trying to find the, not next best action, but like taking all this history. Just what would you do if you had a bunch of stock data, right? You do regression testing. You think this happened and say, okay, now recognize when this is happening again. Think about a client leaving or an advisor leaving, or what are those behaviors? What are the activities and actions that happen in order that preceded the event? So it becomes predictive. I think that's probably close to the holy grail in terms of where AI can really be is what does the predictive look like? I know there's the whole predictive markets thing that is happening in sports gambling and all that. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how can, as any leader of a business wants to better know what's around the corner, I think AI would be able to take some of that historical data and use it to sort of help you understand what's around the corner.
It's interesting because I saw a recent factoid, right? 80%, IBM did some research and they estimate that 80% of data in financial service firms is unstructured.
Yeah, I would say quite a few financial services firms don't even know what they have. I mean, I'm somewhat old in this business, but I remember being a rep and going to 3 different systems in order to get just an exchange account transaction exchange. It was even going back to microfiches, right? So that data's still there and still in that format, and I think it hasn't been fully digitized. And I think that's a big thing. I read it. You threw one stat at me. I'll come back at you with another one. Is the idea that what you do with your data and how your tech stack is set up. So I've been doing some research. We're going to publish a paper here in the next month or so about the multiple that a firm is worth if they have their data and the technology in a good position. And it's about 2.5 times more from a valuation perspective from an acquirer if they have their house in order. And I think that to me is just enough proof right in your face that you should be doing this and should be doing it now.
I mean, that's huge. Never mind the fact that the SEC and FINRA, their record keeping enforcements have surged over the last few years. And, how are you seeing kind of, the firms that do have their data in order versus the firms that don't have their data in order and regulatory oversight?
Yeah, I think regulatory oversight, that part is important because you being able to sort of track your based from an audit log capability. I think the ones that have it in order, the real truth is they will be able to have a first mover advantage of it as technology comes about. So they'll be able to plug that into plug whatever system into their data lake or wherever they're storing their data and be able to get way out in front of. I mean, a lot of people are buying tools up here that are Ferraris, but they're putting they're putting like iced tea in the gas tank in terms of so they're sort of putting the cart before the horse.
I personally can give you examples of that.
Well, what happened is 2 years will go by. They'll look at the budget, the balance sheet, say, we spent all this money and what did we get from it? So then it becomes like, that's where you get that negativity from tech.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We touched briefly on the M&A angle, and this is one that you talked about how firms, I think it was 2.5 times valuation for those that have their data in order. And it's interesting because there's some research that I recently read about when a firm gets acquired, data migration is routinely the number one reason integrations blow past timelines and budget. That's impactful.
I think it sits in the too hard bucket. Everybody knows, especially firms that have been around a while, and they think we can do all these other things, but that's in the too hard bucket. We'll get to that later. And then they never get to it. And that's, even what I would coach is say, you can start it. It may not be finished. It might, like 80% is better than 0%. 60% is better than 0%. So starting with the most current or the most portable or the most, manageable, configurable piece and go from there.
Got it. And, if I wrap up kind of this question set and listen to what you and I have gone back for, I really see, bad data health isn't just the ops problem anymore, right? It's an enterprise valuation problem.
It's an enterprise valuation problem. It's a practice management problem. It's a compliance problem. It's all of the above.
All right. So I'm going to move to the next question. This one, I may be pressing your buttons a little bit because you and I have talked about it.
Okay. I'm ready for it.
We all know you're a CMO. Let's talk your world, right? I think if we look out there, most advisors and in general, most companies I know think marketing means a quarterly newsletter. It means, email campaigns, a LinkedIn post that takes a long time to get approved by compliance. All of this leads to more email than we can digest, right? To me, it's overwhelming, the amount of email I get. How does marketing actually become simpler and more effective?
We are the noisemakers. We have come for your inbox. That is really true. I think we've taken automation and tools and really used them in a negative way. Meaning, just because I can send something to somebody doesn't mean I should. Just because I can't post something doesn't mean I should. And so, I think stepping back a little bit, I think understanding how difficult marketing is. I think there's a misnomer or maybe a misclassification, or maybe I'm just being protective of my tribe. But I do think actually connecting with a human on an emotional level is way more difficult than people give credit for. If you even take a look at like the Super Bowl ads that ran past your Super Bowl, a lot of them weren't funny. A lot of them weren't big action. They were tied to emotions, right? There's the Redfin house about the girl having to move because her family was splitting up. Like those, that's the type of stuff that actually gets to people's hearts. And I think the way to their wallet is through their heart. And so that's where I would get people to not be stodgy newsletter, iron shirt. Be much more of yourself and be human and try to connect with the people. Like, look and talk about the things that they matter to them. That's, I think, the first most important rule of marketing. There you go. Write this down. Is to talk to the audience member that matters about something that matters to them, not something that matters to you.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. So, I'm going to change gears here a little bit. As we're working towards the end of our discussion here today. And I really enjoy asking this question. And in my mind, success leaves clues, but most people are looking at the wrong scoreboard sometimes. So let me ask you this. Who are 2 or 3 people or firms, it's going to be wealth firms, tech providers, doesn't matter, that you think are really winning the game that matters right now?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because there are so many that are doing it so well. I think the ones that are doing well, like I can name firms that we work with, like SEI is one. ESI is another one. Trust me, I've got more than just acronyms of letters. ESI just made a great new hire with my friend Alex David, so I have to give him a plug. But I think those people that, like Dan Bolton at wealth.com, Ashley Dudzik, who's a good friend of mine, like even Shannon Rossick, who works for Informa and does a lot of videos and things like that, I think those people who are, put the phone down and connect with the human, or use the phone to connect, right? So like you see Samantha Russell talks about it, like you should spend 80% of your time online, like liking and sharing and interacting with other people's stuff, way more than you actually producing your own stuff, right? Like, and the algorithms benefit you that. So I think that's real. I think there's some business models, like Integrated Partners has a really good business model in terms of working with CPA firms. I think New Edge has a different sort of choose your own adventure type model, which I think is really interesting. You see broker dealers like Cetera trying to match that in terms of like diversity of channel. And I think you're going to start continuing to see that as assets become more mobile. I think there's recruiting dollars, but also there's the diversity of channels that you can work with if you work with us, right? And I think that those are the ones that I think will really do well.
To me, it's fascinating. I sit in a unique position because I get to see a lot of these different firms, both wealth and providers. And, I'm amazed at the ones that really are doing innovative things to stand out to prospects, customers, and really they are working to build that relationship that you talked, that human aspect.
I'll say one thing in defense of the technology providers. Often the people who sit on the other side of the table kind of look at things through the lens of what you're not doing for me, or what I haven't gotten yet, or what you promised. And I think would encourage them to think about and discover and ask about what are all the things you are doing for me? Because it's probably a lot more than you know. And I think that there's just frustration with tech, and it comes with the game. And I totally understand that. But I do think is this partner really trying to be a partner to me? Is this partner really trying to understand my business? Is this partner overpromising things that they can't deliver? That's a red flag. So I think those types of things is trying to connect at a human level to who you're working with is really important. I mean, at Docupace, I make no mistake. I understand the importance of when somebody makes the decision to, like, say, go with Docupace, they're making a career decision. And like, we need to be stewards of that because they're kind of betting that their job will work out if we work out.
That's a great point. All right, we're wrapping up here, and it's time for the 1% better everyday flash. Ryan, it's time. You got 60 seconds, no scripts, no safety net. Give our audience the one truth about the future of the industry that no one else is willing or too skittish to talk about.
Yeah, I think the one truth about it is there's going to be less of a need for advisors in number, meaning one advisor can serve more people. So you see these big trending research studies about how where the advisors are going to fall off a cliff. The older gentlemen and women aren't going to retire. So they're going to work until they can no longer work anymore. 2, I think one advisor and one assistant or a support team will be unlocked to be able to serve more clients. And also, I think what's most important, what has me most excited is they'll be able to serve lower asset level clients in a way. So sort of catch them while they're young or catch them while they're up and coming. And then the last piece, I'm just throwing a lot out there. You said 6 seconds no matter what. I think this business is going to split into 2. And when I say by that, there's going to be people who focus on the accumulation phase of wealth. Like, how am I growing my assets? How am I maximizing my returns, to the decumulation of wealth, where as people start living longer, get extended, it's going to be a whole industry in itself of how do you effectively spend down your money as cost of living goes up, cost of insurance goes up, all those things. But I'm living longer and it's costing more. I think those are 2 different skill sets.
It's fascinating to me because we've had this question during our roundtables, case studies. And I think the industry has done a terrific job of gathering assets. Now it has to learn how to take those assets and do the things that people need.
When I got married, I thought I got married at 30. I'd spent my entire life trying to find a wife. I had no thought given to how to be a husband. Right. And so that's something that I think the industry is going to have to face.
Now, Ryan, we've enjoyed having you on the show, but before we go, I believe that you all have a little news that you have announced recently. You want to share?
Yes, sir. So we recently announced that Docupace has acquired InvestEdge in its Compliance Edge software. We're moving further into the trade surveillance and compliance space. We had previously offered that through the Giacomo acquisition of 2021. And I couldn't tell you how excited I am about this. One, we have already sort of a really well-baked plan in terms of bringing the best of what we do and the best of what Compliance Edge does together. The people on the Compliance Edge side, I'm a people person. They are incredible. They're already adding value left and right in the meetings with the technology team. And I think that what we're trying to do as a business in Docupace is not do just operations. It also include compliance and try to bring them together as much as possible. So don't think of necessarily one platform or, a compliance ops, but I think we see compliance as a value add. Can be a value add. We see operations as can be a value add. And we were shifting from the sort of nice to have or must have technology to must do technology, meaning you must do this in order to stay compliant, stay business. So we're excited. As you know, working on M&A, I've known about this for a really long time. So now to be able to share it with the world is something I'm super excited about.
Well, we're super excited for you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
Ryan, for people who want to connect with you, where do they find you?
Easy. Email me at Ryan_George@docupace.com or on LinkedIn, R.A. George, Ryan George. You'll see my smiling face. I'll always have it up on my screen somewhere. And feel free to reach out.
Ryan, it's so great to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, friend.
RJ, I loved having Ryan on the show. I love his comments. I love his thinking. Every time we get together, as I said earlier, I come away smarter.
Yeah, you have to listen to him for 2 reasons. One, as you pointed out, he's a very sharp guy. 2, personally, I like his dry sense of humor. His delivery is always the same, and if you're not paying attention, you'll miss his sarcastic or wise-ass comment. It's always there. So I truly enjoy listening to him for those 2 reasons.
3 real takeaways that I took from our conversation as I reflected. Your tech stack is a strategy. Buying more software doesn't necessarily fix the problems. The firms pulling ahead are the ones ruthlessly simplifying, strategically choosing their processes, technology, partners, and maintaining better data as well. And all of this ultimately transfers to less friction for the advisor. Steve Jobs often commented, simple is hard. And it is. Number 2, unstructured data is one of the biggest hidden liabilities. If you can't find it, classify it, or produce it on demand, it's not necessarily an asset. It's a mess. Layer in regulatory and operational demands, and this becomes really a ticking time bomb. And it can potentially blow up or even dramatically slow M&A integrations from occurring. And then finally, and I always love to push Ryan's buttons on this, marketing is a growth lever, not necessarily a compliance problem. The firms that figure out how to arm people with simple, effective, and compliant marketing tools will recruit better, retain better, and grow faster. Additionally, and I love this point that he made, it's got to come from the heart. So everyone else is just publishing newsletters and emails. Unfortunately, few people read. Come from the heart and bring it. So in closing, I've known Ryan for years, and what I really appreciate about him is he doesn't sugarcoat it. The message today was clear. The firms that win the next decade won't be ones with the most technology. They'll be the ones with the cleanest data, the simplest workflows, and the guts to stop doing things the way they've always been done. That takes leadership, not just a budget. So that's our thoughts for today. And before I leave, to quote Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. This is Chip Kispert wishing you well until our next episode of the 1% Better podcast every day.
All right, Chip, and we need to add in a shout out as this podcast is brought to you by Beacon Strategies, LLC, the go-to resource for roundtables, consulting, and services that support wealth management firms and their providers. If you need some industry perspective or help, please visit beaconstrategiesllc.com. Thank you for listening to the Beacon 1% Better podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening, and for Chip and everyone at Beacon Strategies, I'm RJ Malik, and we look forward to you joining us for our next podcast.